Welcome to the Powered by Factum podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Fuller, and I'm here with Steve Chater, one of my coaches, mentors, great friend. And Steve, you introduced me to an idea that literally changed my life and became, I would say, the core principle, guiding principle here at Factum, which is creating the ideal life. So I'd love to talk to you about this today and what we call focusing on success.
Okay. That's awesome. Even as you say that, Kyle, the big picture here we're talking about is leadership, right? And so we talk about leading your life. We ask the question, who's leading your life? And if it's not you, who is it?
Great question to ask.
Right?
If you're not leading your life, who is?
Yes, exactly. And so, and that's a really deep question. You don't want to blow by it. What you're referencing here and what we're talking about is kind of a structure for leading your life, which we call focus on success. And most people, at Factum, what we're trying to help people do is to create financial independence. And many people think, well, if I have enough money, I'll be successful. And there's that thought process of, well, if I just had what you had, then I could do what you do and I'll be like you. When quite frankly, it's backwards. And the issue is, if I could be like you and do what you do, then I can have what you have. And so most people are thinking backwards on this. They think, well, and by the way, that's victim thinking. That's not leadership thinking. Victim thinking is, well, I can't because I don't have what you have, and you can because you do. And so the overriding goal is, as we're looking at this, is leading. And when we talk about leading your life, and we say, well, what would a successful life look like? We broke it down into different ideas that as we explored the ideas, we start to come up with some of the answers that we're looking for. So, and we started all of that because this quote that I absolutely love from Eleanor Roosevelt, and you know what it is, so I'll let you say it.
She said, small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. Mm-hmm. Can we just sit on that for a minute? Because that comes up in my mind.
Say it again.
Small
people
minds
watching here can't see what you're saying.
Small minds talk about people. Mm-hmm. Average minds talk about events.
So could we just say gossip? Could we just say Hollywood? Could we just say politicians? Could we just say, right? All of those things. Yeah. Those are small minds talk about people. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Average minds talk about events.
So should we talk about climate change? Should we talk about weather disasters? Should we talk about the economy? Should we talk about what are you going to do on vacation? I'm going to Disneyland, right?
We are going there soon.
Yeah, right.
That is an event.
So, and that's average. That's normal. That we average minds talk about events.
And great minds talk about ideas.
So Eleanor Roosevelt was Franklin Roosevelt's, and she's credited with a lot of great quotes. I just happen to love this one. Franklin Roosevelt was the only guy who was elected to the presidency 3 times. And many people call him one of the greatest presidents, especially if you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you think it's Reagan or Trump or something, right? But so who did she get to spend time with? She's the president's wife. She got to spend time with the leaders of the world and their families and their sphere of influence and the members of the cabinet and all of these other things. And she realized that they have a different kind of conversation. So there's a guy who used to be a motivational speaker. He's passed away now. Zig Ziglar was his name. And I think he got this from Jim Rohn, who was another motivational speaker. But he said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Why? Because it's the conversation. And what is it that you're talking about? And so are you talking about the Cardinals football game and the fact that Kyler Murray is back or whatever it happens to be? And is that how deep your conversation is going? Or are you talking about deeper conversations of what does it look like to be successful?
Yeah.
And so everything that we do at Factum as part of the culture here is we know that people want to be successful and that the average person wants to get to some sort of financial independence. And you and I have talked before about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. and how Robert Kiyosaki wrote that book. And his poor dad said, go get a good job with good benefits and a good retirement and you'll be fine. And then he said, and by the way, that's what he did. And he had his doctor. His dad had a doctorate, and he was the dean at the University of Hawaii, and he was no slouch, and he followed his advice. But his rich dad had different kind of advice for him, different ideas. And so Robert Kiyosaki is a multimillionaire who's helped many other people achieve the same thing because of the ideas that his rich dad taught him. So that's what we do at Factum, is we say we want to be successful. We want to focus on successful. So what kind of ideas do we need to talk about in order to lead our lives to be truly successful?
And so let's start then, Steve, with the idea of living the ideal life.
Okay.
This was a concept that it rocked my world, but it also opened up so much clarity, because we had been going to lunch for a while, and I had been attending a class you were teaching to real estate agents, and I was there as an insurance agent trying to grow. And we were at lunch one day, and you were asking me amazing questions like you always do. And we were describing how I was feeling at the time, because I felt like, hey, I feel like everything's going my way. I'm happy. I'm fulfilled. Like, I feel like my life is amazing. And you started to help me unfold that the reason I was feeling like that is because I had abundance in all areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But until I saw it in that framework, I didn't really, I was fine. I was happy. I was fulfilled. But as soon as I saw basically the blueprint for it, it helped me get so intentional with why that was happening. And that is what I believe that most people are searching for in this life. We hear so much on the internet, and the wealth building conversation is getting more and more popular right now, in my opinion. And I think everyone is searching for financial independence, but they don't understand why. And I think that's a really important piece. And it's not so much the financial independence that sets you free, and it's the abundance in all areas of life. The financial piece is just one of them. And the purpose of winning financially is not just to have more money, it's to fund your vision for that ideal life.
If you don't have clarity on that vision and what that life looks like, when somebody asks you how much do you need, the only answer is more.
And that is not an accurate enough number to chase down.
Yeah,
like it cannot be your strategy.
Right. It can't be a goal.
It's more.
Right. So we started out with Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, great minds talk about ideas. And I only want to be with people that are great. I want to talk with people that inspire me to think bigger, to do more, to move forward faster, all of that. And those are the ideas. So we started this with the first idea. And the first idea that we talk about when we're looking at focusing on success in life, leading a successful life, is that life includes 5 areas. Okay. And so the first area is spiritual. The second area is personal. The third area is family. The fourth area is financial. And the fifth area is community. Okay. Now, community includes business.
Could be your occupation.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you have to be in business.
No, not at all.
You can still live an abundant life as an employee, self-employed individual.
People volunteer at nonprofits and things like that. It's the community. Yeah. It's what are you doing outside of yourself and your family, right? So spiritual, personal, family, financial, and then community. Mm-hmm. And so we say that's our first idea. Life includes these 5 areas. And so then my question that I ask when I'm teaching it is, do you believe that's true? And 99% of the time I get, yeah, that's true. And the only times that I don't get that's true, they say, well, what about health?
Right.
Okay. And I said, that's personal. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I could say, you could almost take personal and transform it to physical, because we have a spiritual part of us, which is how we think. The thoughts that we have, every thought is a spiritual transaction. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it, but it has impact, right? So personal could be physical, but I think it's bigger than that. So that's why I call it personal.
Isn't it interesting that instinctively, I think most people understand that is what they're searching for. Uh-huh. That's a truth that they believe and understand, even though that might have been the first time they've ever been asked that question. Mm-hmm. Is this an idea that you believe? And almost automatically every time that, yes. And when I was young in my career in insurance, I had two wonderful mentors who were very dialed in financially. And it's an aspect I looked at them and said, I want to be just like them. Until I got to know them well enough to see other parts of their life. And one of them was the family sector. And when I saw what that relationship was like, I realized I actually didn't want to be anything like them in that area of life. Mm-hmm. I had my own vision for what my life needed to look like for that particular piece. And it's interesting because you'll talk to people who maybe have made it financially. And one of the things I almost always hear is like, don't get too wrapped up in the things, because the things will not bring you happiness. Right. I was still depressed even though I was making millions of dollars because my family life was in shambles. So then I had to go back and rebuild the family life. And there was a void that you cannot fill if one of those areas is missing.
And you can't replace it either.
You can't.
Because the time part is finite. And
right.
So you can't just say, well, I'll get back to it later. No, you missed that part of time.
It's gone.
Yeah. So I totally get that, which is, quite frankly, that's one of our ideas that we talk about, right? And so what is the conversation you have with the people around you? Is it edifying? Does it push you forward? Is it about ideas that bring more? Or is it about events, or is it about people? Evaluating that, because what's the issue here? And you said it, you said the word, you said my vision for my life. That's what leaders have, is clarity of vision. They know where it is they intend to go. Could that change? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most likely it will.
But, right. Exactly. It's interesting. The co-author of my book, Hold, Linda McKissick, said one time, we were in a mastermind together, and she goes, I come out of this mastermind and I feel like what's happened is I'm on this one floor and there's all of these doors all around me. And then I go to the mastermind and I go up this ladder and there's a whole different floor with all new doors around me. Okay. And that visual to me is just really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, your vision changes. But the thing is, you have clarity on what it is that you want. So a couple things. So let's just go to the ideas quickly. The first idea is that life includes 5 areas. Now, the question is, do you believe that's true? The next question is, do you believe it's 100% true? And if you believe it's 100% true, then what are you doing? How does that change what you do and how you think? So the next idea is, well, if life includes 5 circles and we're focusing on success, the next idea that we talk about is the perfect life. What would the perfect life be? And we've defined it as abundance in all 5 of those areas. You've already used that word and you said, you know what, I had abundance in these 5 areas in life and I was satisfied with where I was. Is your vision today bigger than what it was?
It is 100 times bigger.
Exactly. And so as a leader, having clarity on that vision, a vision of what? Okay, a vision of what does abundance look like spiritually? How am I growing in my thinking and my understanding and my wisdom and the decisions that I make? Because spiritually I'm growing and I'm doing it on purpose. How do I create abundance personally or spiritually, personally, family? What's abundance family look like? What does abundance financially look like? What does abundance in community look like? So in leading my life, what I'm looking for is clarity on what abundance might look like to you is going to be different than me. Mm-hmm. But in me leading my life, or you leading your life, or anybody else leading their lives, you have clarity on that vision. Most people have a business plan.
Yeah.
A business plan to do what? To make money. To make money to do what? To fund their family. Right?
Yeah.
And so they go through but if they don't have clarity on what does abundance look like personally, family, spiritually, financially, then how do you make an effective business plan to be successful in all of life if you're not clear on what that abundance looks like?
It's hard to do, maybe impossible.
Well, that's why people look, Charles Dickens wrote the Scrooge story, the Christmas story about Ebenezer Scrooge and how and so this is back, I don't know where, was he in the 1800s or something? It was just a long time ago. And Ebenezer Scrooge was so focused on making money that he didn't know where his employee Bob Cratchit was going on Christmas Eve and why he would be leaving the office. And then the ghost of Christmas present, past, and future come and give him a vision of what it looks like of what his life was like, and of what his life is like now, and what his life could look like. Vision. It's that vision of leadership. And we've just taken it down into a simple conversation of there's 5 areas in life. What's your vision for abundance, spiritually, personally, family, financial, and community, which includes your business?
I think having that awareness too that was such a game changer for me, because like I told you at that lunch appointment, here's how I'm feeling, Steve, and it was just kind of happening. I almost like stumbled into it accidentally. Wasn't tracking a lot of things, and until we got together and I got more intentional about all this stuff, we realized, Diane and I we had won the money game, so our passive income was significantly higher than our monthly expenses. We had no idea it happened. We were just busy doing life, right? Which a lot of us do. And we got to that point, and all other areas of our life were good. I felt like I don't have anything to complain about. I was happy every day, waking up with purpose in my life. We were doing well financially. Our family's healthy, good relationships, good conversations.
You used the right word for our third idea, and you said intentional. Okay. And so you're giving us this personal story of how this has worked out in your life, but it wasn't intentional.
Right.
Right. And you were just doing, you have a set of values, and you have a character that says, because of my values and my character, these are the kind of decisions I'll make. But being intentional about saying, what does abundance really look like in each one of these areas? That's the third idea. So the first one is 5 areas of life: spiritual, personal, family, financial, and community. The second idea is, what would the perfect life be? The perfect life would be abundance in every one of those areas. And when we're talking about leadership, I believe it's incumbent on you, me, and everybody to have clarity on what does abundance look like. And by the way, I've seen marriages dissolve over the lack of community conversation in the marital community on what does abundance look like. So dad goes to work too much and sacrifices the family and the marriage. Okay. So what's our third idea? Abundance requires intentional growth.
Yes.
What you just talked about.
Yes.
And that you had been growing intentionally, but the thing is that you'd achieved one of the goals and you didn't even know it because you weren't really intentional about saying, what does this look like? You didn't have a number in mind. You didn't have a freedom number in mind. You just were working.
Just kind of happened.
Right. Head down. But that's because of your values and your character. Somebody else, what would have happened might not have been abundance in all areas. It might have been abundance in 1 or 2, but not in all of them. And we're defining that an abundant life in all of the areas is a successful life. That's how we think at Factum. That's how our conversation goes. That's how our culture is about, that we want not just the people working with us, but we want our clients to experience the same thing.
And I think that's what ultimately people are searching for, right? We hear the financial independence on a regular basis.
Right.
Get financial independence. But I think the piece that's missing to that is why.
Yes.
For what purpose?
And how much.
And how much. And
right.
Until you sit down and intentionally draw this out, which was a difficult exercise for me at first. Mm-hmm. I thought I had my life together before I met you, Steve. And then it was the intention behind, okay, write out what your life looks like, Kyle.
Come on, Kyle, you're still a mess.
I'm a work in progress. That's why we're still having lunches and I'm still getting coaching from you. But once I started writing out, okay, what does my life look like when I have abundance spiritually? I think I had 1 sentence down. That's what I could come up with. It was very difficult for me. But right. The longer I worked on it, I had to be intentional with it. And I did it for an hour once a week for 2 months with Diane, some of our close friends, to really get the infrastructure of it down.
Right.
And the more conversations you can be around with individuals who talk about ideas, the more you start to develop, I love that Steve is focused on this in his life. That's actually a value I want too. So I'm going to incorporate that into my life. Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful conversation. Once that initial exercise was, I'll say, like 80% there, then I knew the path going forward. This is what my life will look like. In this life, I will wake up with passion, purpose, happiness every second of every day.
Clarity of vision. And if you don't have clarity of vision, you're frustrated. You're frustrated because you're not sure exactly where to go. Have you ever been asked to go to somebody's house and you forgot your phone and you don't have, and all of a sudden, I can't ask Google where I should be going? or some event or something like that. You ever felt that kind of frustration? Imagine if it was bigger than that and it was your life, not just where you're going for a party.
Well, and that reality is, I think most people are in that realm.
Oh yeah.
They're
absolutely.
just, and what do you always say, Steve? You don't drift to a desired location.
Right.
I think a lot of people, they know what they want, but they haven't spent enough time designing it. And is it hard you need two destinations on a GPS, right?
Right.
Your starting point and your destination. Well, if you haven't described your destination, what are the odds of someone randomly showing up there in a decent time frame?
Right.
That could be too late by the time you figure it out. What took you maybe 40 years to realize, maybe it could have been done in 10 if you had the right roadmap.
Right. Right. So that's our third idea, right? Abundance requires intentional growth. And so that intentionality of getting clear on what does abundance look like and where do I need to grow. Let's talk about spiritual, because you can't talk about religion, you can't talk about politics, and you can't talk about money, right? Those are the three things you can't talk about. And so I happen to believe that I'm created by God for a purpose. Okay, so that's what I believe about myself. So my question is, what's my purpose? And how do I fulfill that purpose? Now, if I didn't believe that I was a spiritual being having a physical experience, I might have a different idea, but spiritual growth still happens by saying, how do I change my thinking so that I'm abundance-minded instead of scarcity-minded when it comes to money, for example? Or I'm abundance-minded, so spiritual can be as simple as, how am I changing my thinking? What books am I reading? What podcasts am I listening to? Am I listening to things that edify me? Or am I listening to things that terrify me because I'm looking at what's going on in the economy?
Talking about events and people.
There you go. Exactly. And actually we've defined the third idea a different way from the negative, and everybody knows the definition of insanity. Mm-hmm. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results instead of being intentional about growth, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then our fourth idea, and there's more, there's lots more that come from, but that intentional growth, the third idea, goes back to that quote that I like, which is, you do not drift to a desired location. You have to be intentional about saying, here's where I am, here's where I want to be, what's the gap, and how do I navigate the gap? That's leadership. Mm-hmm. And so not only do I know where I'm going, now I'm looking and saying, well, what's my strategy to get there? How am I going to make that happen? And then finally, the next idea that you and I talk about all the time, and there's so many more, but the big picture, the overriding picture is the fourth idea, and that is, in every one of those areas in your life, the most important thing is relationships. So you want to focus on it. You ever read the book Tuesday with Morrie?
I have not.
Okay. So it's this guy, Morrie's an old guy and he's dying, and this writer, I can't remember who it was, but it's a powerful book because he spent Tuesdays with Morrie, and he writes about the wisdom that he learned in the relationship with this guy Morrie about life and about what life is about. It's a powerful book. So the most important thing in every one of those areas is relationship. So in my world, the way that I believe, because I believe I was created, and because I was created for a purpose, then it's my relationship to my Creator. In the personal side, it's my relationship to myself. Do I see myself as a victim or a victor? Do I see myself as capable, or do I see, or not? It's my relationship, my self-talk, my thinking, and how I'm growing personally. In family, it's my relationships to my wife and my kids and my siblings. And you've heard me say this before, but one of my values, because of that idea, is that damaged relationships are not okay.
Yeah. And
so I told you that I spent 4 hours having this conversation yesterday as a guy was driving me back from the dunes, and that was the essence of our conversation, because he was recounting all of the damaged relationships that after 10 or 15 years are starting to come back. Who's leading to make sure? Because when we talk about the most important thing is a relationship, I want to add a subheading to that. The conversation is the relationship. So are you intentional about the conversation, talking about ideas? Or are you talking about sporting events?
Right.
Right? So That's the way you measure the depth of the relationship, because you measure how deep is the conversation going. Money. What's your relationship to money in the financial area? Is it a relationship of scarcity? I don't have enough, so I can't give any away. And I heard this the other day, because we talk about generosity all the time at Factum. And if somebody thinks that I don't make enough to be generous, it doesn't matter how much they make.
Yeah.
They won't be generous, because their thought process is a scarcity thought process as opposed to an abundant thought process. And again, if we go back to Proverbs, which we talked about, was it in a different podcast? And in Proverbs it says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So we know that the giver receives more than the getter, although the getter is grateful many times for what they get, but the giver gets inner satisfaction for giving to somebody else. But that's a mindset issue, and it's an abundant mindset. And if you don't think that you have enough to give, it's because you're consuming more and you're living on 100% or more of what you make, which is a bad relationship with money.
Correct.
Okay. And then community goes for, it's in business, who are you in relationship with? In every area of the community, what are your relationships? And the relationships are the most important.
And those are based off the conversations we're having.
That's how to measure it. And so now, are you intentional about it? Because it's real easy to talk about the football game or the basketball game or the economy or the politics or all of the different events. That's easy to have that conversation. And so if you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, you have to either raise the bar because you're intentional about doing it, or you have to be intentional about growing by changing who you're spending the most time with. And don't we as parents know that with our kids?
Oh, I think instinctively.
Exactly.
We're very protective of that, but we might not be doing it for ourselves.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And this takes me back to the first part of this episode where you brought up the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, and I said this comes up a lot for me now. It is in my subconscious now. It's there. And I'm very conscious of when conversations go to events or people.
Which quote is that?
Small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas.
Yeah, I just noticed you had to read it.
I did. We were deep into this conversation. And, when I'm with individuals now and the conversation goes there, it tires me out quickly.
Yeah.
You get bored of it because as you grow and you understand what's going to bring you everything you're really looking for in this life, which is that abundance in all areas.
Right.
It gives you energy and you crave being with people who only talk about ideas. It's a different conversation. And when it goes to, did you hear about this or that, or now this team's losing, whatever it is, I just have become very disinterested in a lot of those conversations.
Sure.
They don't bring that depth. And I think you would describe that as those become the people in your life that you want to spend 5 or 10 minutes with. You still want to catch up with them and we can still love them, but that's not someone you want to go to lunch with once a month for an hour and a half and get into some big idea. Like, it just becomes unimportant to you.
Yeah. And so you have to make those choices. And damaged relationships are not okay. So I do believe in keeping those. There's a guy named Arthur C. Brooks, Dr. Arthur C. Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard, and he teaches on happiness. And he wrote a book. The first one of his books that I read is called From Strength to Strength. And the essence of that book is how to have happiness in the second half of life. Okay. So powerful book. And what he talks about is real friends and deal friends.
Real friends and deal friends?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And so the real friend is the one that you're talking to and that you can share your life with and that you're going to spend time with. You're going to travel with them. And your conversation is going to be different with those real friends than it is with your deal friends. Because the deal friends are going to go away when you don't provide value for them anymore. Okay. So he wrote that book, and I read that book 3 times. As I told you about this, and I read that book 3 times because I'm going, wow, this is so deep. So Oprah read that book and immediately called him up. And now he and Oprah are now with a second book, and I can't remember the name of it, Designing the Best Life or something like that. But it's Dr. Arthur C. Brooks and Oprah Winfrey on creating happiness and making that happen. And everything that we're talking about, isn't that what we wanted? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of Happiness. And isn't that what our country was talking about? And so then the issue is, how do we create that? And many people think if I have more money, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting how many people are happy that don't have money?
Right.
Because they've got clarity on the areas of life and what they want to accomplish. And they don't create the stress on themselves to create something that doesn't provide happiness for themselves.
Or their life is designed for that optimal level of happiness, which is the abundance, and they figured out I might only need $5,000 a month to live that life.
Exactly.
That might be surfing every morning.
Right.
It could be hiking from 9 to noon, whatever it is, volunteering at your kid's school, whatever. That looks different for everyone, but where the math becomes important is when you have designed that life, and then you can work into that number, go backwards into it and say, I actually need this number.
You and I both know that guy, right? So in our wealth building mastermind, Jason told us the story about how his marriage was being strained by his goal to create more money. And when he and his wife sat back and said, what do we need to have? And he knew that if he had $250,000 a year, he could fund the life that they wanted to have. Now, he's actually doing better than that, but he was able to alternate the focus from one area in his life to another area in his life, and he's way happier because he's leading his life in a better direction.
Yeah. And that becomes the byproduct of this exercise.
Right.
And people are they know it internally that this is what they're searching for. And if they were anything like me, until I had a conversation with you about this, that's when I identified that is what it is. That's why I'm feeling like this. And once you have the roadmap or the template, it becomes very easy to plug in your situation into that and then just work the math backwards into how much do you really need to make this happen.
So work this whole thing backwards, because I started teaching Focus on Success to real estate agents to teach them how to sell more houses. And that was the essence of it. And after a couple of years, somebody in the class came to me and said, we got it, Steve. We're doing really well. We're happy. Can you go deeper on this? And so I was challenged to say, what do we really want success to look like?
Yeah.
Is it selling more houses? And so that's where this conversation and these concepts and these ideas came together. And when I saw the Roosevelt quote and I saw what Eleanor wrote, and I go, oh, what are the ideas that these people talk about? And thankfully, I've been involved with masterminds that people are talking about ideas that are way bigger, and I'm learning and I'm being stretched. But it's just like a rubber band. Once your mind gets stretched, it never returns back to its original form. Right?
It's a very good concept.
Yep.
And so let's talk about how this makes the community unique, Steve, because I think we do these agent masterminds twice a year now. And we had a gal from the insurance company come out. And now she's been in the industry, I think, 25, 30 years. So her particular role at One America, she gets to see hundreds and hundreds of different types of agencies. And when she was out here at ours, this 5 areas conversation is, I would say, involved in almost every conversation we have. It all ties back to this. The reason we're going to do this is to fund the perfect lifestyle. The reason we're going to focus on this is to make sure we're living abundantly in all areas.
Right.
And that's the essence of the community here that we've created. And she mentioned something. She said, I've seen hundreds of agencies in the life insurance realm, and I've never seen one that's investing so much of their education into their people and the progression of people. And this is a relationship-based conversation. And what ends up happening is this attracts, I would say, the right type of person to our community. Because if you look at a lot of other brokerages, you would find more times than less, everything's production-based.
Sure.
That's the one metric they're focusing on. Just like people trying to win financially, the only metric they're really focusing on is making more money.
What's in it for me?
Right.
So if I can help you make me more money, then I'm happy.
Right.
Okay. On the other side of the coin, we switch it and say, what's in it for you? If I can help you build and create a bigger, better life, and with the product that we happen to use to create the money happens to be whole life insurance, that's a whole different conversation.
Yes.
Okay. And people don't leave that relationship, because when it's about the money, then it's going to be about the commission split or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. If you're looking to build the community, I will say it has to be built right. with the right principles in place.
Right.
And the reason we've had such good success with attracting the right people is that they come in for the right reasons. And once you're in a tribe or a community like that, it's almost addictive. You want to stay around it because you're winning in all areas of life. And is there anything more? You're talking about that book, Strength to Strengths, and we're in different phases of life right now because you had me read that too. And is there anything more fulfilling for you than to see an individual that you're teaching like this start becoming that person?
That the individuals, and by the way, that same all of these conversations in each one of the areas in life bleeds over into the other areas of life. So my conversation with my family, the conversation with my community, the way that I'm thinking and acting with money, the way that I'm growing personally. My dad used to say, you probably can't say moron anymore, but my dad used to say, the moron keeps hitting himself in the head with a hammer because it feels so good when he quits. Okay. And we have so many people that keep banging their head against the wall, in order to achieve something. And if they don't have clarity on what, why, and how, what does abundance look like? What's my strategy to get here? How's it affecting all of the above? So I'm the oldest in my family. My brother passed away on the ski slope a couple of years ago with a massive heart attack. And he and I were having these awesome conversations about what does life look like? How do we provide for our parents when they're elderly and all of that? And what are our responsibilities? Because my sisters are not in a position to be able to do any of that kind of stuff. Those are real life, deep, meaningful conversations that, by the way, I can't just make it with my brother because whatever conversation I make affects my family, right? It all bleeds over. Yeah, I miss him, but I know what I miss. I miss the conversations.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all of these ideas come together in life. And this is what we want for the people in Factum, to be able to have a successful life because they have clarity on what does that look like for them, one. Two, we want to be able to help them think bigger because even though you thought you had abundance, the abundance that you thought you had is bigger now, which means you can be more impactful and affect more people. And it doesn't mean you have to grow the time that you put into different areas. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It means you can limit the time for each one of the areas to make sure that each one of the areas is effective in you achieving your goal. And so when we get into coaching and training and keeping Factum people involved in this conversation, and they're growing and developing, instead of hitting their head against the wall because it feels so good when they quit. Okay. We create a culture that's not like anybody else's. And so what I've learned is if I can create success through other people, and so the definition of success becomes results through others as opposed to results I create. Now it's a whole different way of thinking. It's a whole different way of acting. It's a whole different way of moving. And it's a whole different way of achieving. Understanding the definition of success is not what I do, but what I can create through other people.
That goes right into it has an infinite ripple effect.
Yes.
And that's one thing that gets me very excited about what we're building, is that it is going to have a massive infinite ripple effect on our agents, on the clients we serve, the families that we associate with.
Yep.
Because that conversation is so big, because it is a great idea. It is creating that ideal life. And so I just wanted to end with the quote one more time, just so that our audience can remember this.
Okay.
Small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. So as we start navigating this life, let's be very conscious and aware of the conversations we have, because those are what dictate the relationships we have in our lives. And if there's one thing that's important for building abundance in all areas of life, it is the relationship, spiritually, personally, family, financial, and with the community.
And the goal to intentionally grow the relationships.
That's it.
Right.
Now we attach the intentional growth behind all of that. Now we're in a position to really do something wonderful, fulfilling, passion fueled in our lives, which is, I know, what more people are searching for right now.
Right. And interestingly, the guy that I was talking about is looking at trying to replace damaged relationships that are 10 or 15 years. came because he chose to grow spiritually, and his family said no.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I will say I think the spiritual area of life is the most important.
Well, I appreciate the lack of fear that you show inside of Factum to have spiritual be a part of the conversation. We're not talking about what religion you need to believe. We're talking about what does spiritual growth look like and where does it actually come from? And if I could boil it down to one thing, it's wisdom. Okay? Spiritual comes from the inspirational comes from the word spirit. So we get inspired to do things sometimes, and that's a spiritual transaction whenever we're inspired to do something. Sometimes music inspires us. We're going to talk about religion, although I do believe that religion provides a framework for somebody, just like our 5 areas conversation does, provides a framework for somebody to say, oh, I see how I can grow my relationship to my creator. If you believe you have a creator, if you don't believe you have a creator, that's fine. You can still grow spiritually.
Absolutely. And so if you enjoyed this conversation today, make sure you like and subscribe so you can get future episodes like this, because this 5 areas conversation will be one that's integrated in almost everything we're talking about.
We've only scratched the surface.
There's a much deeper, broader conversation involved with this. This was the Kickstarter to it. And if you're feeling like something's not quite lining up for you, come and join our community, because these are the conversations we have on a regular basis. We talk about great ideas. We connect with people through conversations and relationships. And so if you're looking for that right community, make sure to tune into our content, our conversations, come out to our live events, come be around this community, because when you're there in person, I think that's when it really starts to take effect.
That's true. And you know what? Most of us do business by referral, and we believe in somebody because they've been referred to us. I think the proof is in the pudding. If somebody's looking at this and saying, hey, they're doing something different, why don't you talk to some of the people that are part of Factum and ask them what's happened, because they're part of this conversation, and what has this done for their life and their business and their family and their finances and their personal growth.
Yeah, the testimonials, I think, are a big part. I heard something interesting, and we'll end on this. How do people buy things right now when they go onto Amazon, Steve?
Yeah.
Do they go look at the product description first?
No, they look at the stars.
We look at how many 5,000 5+ stars are on there.
Right.
And if that lines up, then you go to the description. You say, all right, well, what about this product, right?
Yeah.
That's what you'll feel and see with this community, is so many people that will have a testimonial of that experience of how this 5 areas conversation completely changed their life. We're here as an insurance agency, but what do people talk about here? Their relationships with their family, their spiritual purpose in life. You'll hear those conversations 4 times to 1 as a financial conversation here. And I think that's what's made this community so unique.
And it's obvious, because if you don't have clarity on what abundance looks like in all the other 4 areas, how do you make an effective business plan?
Right.
And how do you determine how much time you're going to spend in that area of life?
It's completely backwards.
It is. Or it could be. Most people go backwards with it.
Yes. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you being on today, and I'm looking forward to many more conversations in the future.
Yep, you and me both.